This is the CBS Evening News with Jeff Glor.
And good evening. We begin our broadcast this evening with a scathing letter sent by FBI Director Robert Mueller to officials in Scotland. 2 days after Scotland's Justice Minister released a Libyan agent convicted of bombing Pan Am Flight 103 in 1988, an act of terrorism that took 270 lives. At the same time tonight, Britain finds itself denying the bomber's release was the price of doing business. Sheila McVicker has our story.
This was how the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi greeted Lockerbie bomber Abdel Basset al-Megrahi. He could have been welcoming a prodigal son rather than a convicted terrorist. In an unprecedented move, the director of the FBI weighed in today. 2 decades ago, as a prosecutor, Robert Mueller investigated the bombing of Pan Am 103. In an uncompromising letter, he blasted the Scottish minister responsible for releasing Megrahi. Mueller writes, "I am outraged at your decision. Your action makes a mockery of the rule of law," adding, "Your action gives comfort to terrorists around the world. You have given the family members of those who died continued grief and frustration," ending, "Where, I ask, is the justice?" Now there are growing accusations from family members and others that Megrahi was released in order to pave the way for more British business deals with Libya, especially oil deals. Allegations the British government rejects.
The idea that the British government and the Libyan government would sit down and somehow barter over the freedom or the life of this Libyan prisoner and make it form part of some business deal, it's not only wrong, it's completely implausible and actually quite offensive.
But in these pictures taken on board the Libyan plane carrying al-Megrahi to freedom, Gaddafi's son and heir apparent, Saif, tells him, quote, "In all the trade, oil and gas deals, whenever British interests came to Libya, we would always put your release on the table." Just 10 days ago, the UK Business Secretary Peter Mandelson was in Greece on vacation, where he held meetings with Saif Gaddafi. Another good friend of the Gaddafis is Queen Elizabeth's second son, Prince Andrew. He works to promote British business interests. In the last year alone, he has met the Libyan leader at least 3 times and sees his son frequently. He is supposed to return to Libya next month. Gaddafi himself added to those suspicions by publicly thanking Britain's Prime Minister Gordon Brown, Queen Elizabeth, and Prince Andrew for their role in the, quote, "courageous decision to release Megrahi."
The government is going to come under pressure to make a more detailed statement. There are a number of outstanding questions, and silence, I don't think, is serving the British interest well.
Megrahi was released by the Scottish Justice Minister on what he claimed were compassionate grounds. But it all now has the whiff of money. While there may not be a deal, there is the clear expectation that Megrahi's release will improve relations between Britain and Libya, and that better relations will mean more business. Sheila McVicker, CBS News, London.
Tonight, there are new allegations of torture by the CIA. Newsweek magazine is reporting that a secret 2004 report reveals that interrogators use mock executions to intimidate prisoners. And a federal judge has ordered the release Monday of that 5-year-old Inspector General's report. Earlier today, I spoke with one of the authors of the article, Newsweek investigative correspondent Mark Hosenball, and asked him more about what's in the previously classified document.
The report is going to reveal for the first time that the CIA conducted what are described as mock executions of some of the high-value detainees, more than one from the sounds of things. And in the case of one detainee that we know about, somebody named Abdelrahman al-Nashiri, who was an alleged architect of the USS Cole bombing, this report alleges that at some point CIA interrogators, whether they're contractors or CIA staff officers, brandished a gun in front of this guy in an effort to frighten him, and also took a power drill in front of him and turned it on and went bzzz, implying therefore that they're going to use it on him.
Does this report make an investigation by Attorney General Holder more likely?
Well, Attorney General Holder, in interviews with some of my colleagues at Newsweek and in other statements for the last 2 or 3 months, has been making pretty strong hints that he does want to conduct a criminal investigation of whether officials at the CIA exceeded Justice Department guidelines laid down by the Bush administration.
Mark Hosenball, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We move now to Hurricane Bill. The storm, down to a Category 1, is churning through the North Atlantic, but it's still big enough to affect much of the East Coast with wet weather and wild surf. Reporter Bill Shields from our affiliate WBZ joins us from Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts this evening. Bill, good evening.
Good evening, Jeff. You'd never know that there's a hurricane offshore when you look at the ocean and back of me. It's fairly calm here. But if you go on the other side of Martha's Vineyards, it's a whole different story. There's some pretty good surf over there, and it's making a lot of vacationers very unhappy. It's not exactly a good beach weekend along the eastern seaboard unless you're a surfer. The brunt of Hurricane Bill won't come anywhere near the coast, but there could be heavy wind gusts and offshore waves of up to 20 feet.
Bill is very far offshore, but it is such a big storm. In fact, tropical storm force winds extend out 275 miles from the center.
The biggest danger? Riptides that can drag swimmers out to sea. So the water's off limits at beaches up and down the East Coast, from Cape Hatteras to Cape Cod. Horrible timing on one of the last weekends of summer.
I'm disappointed not to go into the water because I really do love to swim.
I think it's back to the house, to the deck.
Most beaches at least remained open to sunbathers, but at high tide, the sand was sometimes underwater.
We're going to probably see many, many more situations where people are going to be walking ankle deep and get swept out, because ankle deep goes the knee deep, goes the waist deep, goes the chest deep.
Still, it's nothing like what happened in Bermuda, where 105-mile-an-hour winds caused flooding and power outages. But for all Bill's bluster, the island reports no injuries or deaths.
We got a bit of wind, but we're used to that.
After bringing heavy rain and high winds to the islands and Cape Cod, Hurricane Bill is expected to move north and slam into Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia tomorrow. Jeff?
And Bill, we also know that the first family is expected on Martha's Vineyard tomorrow. Is the hurricane expected to affect their trip at all?
Only the arrival, Jeff. Maybe the president and his family will be delayed a little bit. After that, the weather's supposed to be great for the rest of the week.
All right, Bill Shields from our affiliate WBZ joining us from Martha's Vineyard tonight. Bill, thank you. In his weekly address today, President Obama called for an honest debate on health care reform, and he accused some critics of making, quote, phony claims. It has been a rough summer for the president, and as Kimberly Dozier reports tonight, right now, he's looking for a recharge.
This is a man sorely in need of a vacation. Barack Obama still has a 57% approval rating, but that's down by more than 10 points. So are his poll numbers for his handling of the economy, the war in Afghanistan, and his signature issue, health care reform. His critics say he hasn't done a good job explaining why reform is needed, despite 11 town hall meetings.
You will finally have quality, affordable options.
12 speeches.
That our health reform bill will extend coverage.
And 16 interviews devoted just to health care.
Reduce the cost inflation of health care.
And the reasons the White House gives for the need for reform keep changing.
I don't think they've ever distilled their argument down into that, 25 words or less that breaks through to people to say, oh, I get it now. I see why he thinks we should do this.
Critics say part of the problem is that the president delegated the job of coming up with a bill to Congress. There are now so many versions, the opposition has a lot to attack.
It's very difficult to sell something when you don't have a concrete bill.
And that lack of clarity is confusing or turning off key voting blocs like seniors.
I think that's the biggest problem, that none of us really know what's going to be.
Reform opponents point to Mr. Obama's own words when they warned seniors their benefits could be slashed.
Cutting out the waste and insurance company giveaways in Medicare.
Seniors want to know just what's being cut out.
People talk about seniors losing coverage. Where's it written? Where are the words?
Democratic strategists say the White House is trying to refocus its message by selling this as a benefit to the middle class instead of an obligation to pay for 46 million uninsured.
What it's going to offer to the middle class, and that's stability or security. It's peace of mind.
Now, the other job ahead is to bring some discipline to this process. Last weekend, the White House sent out confusing messages about whether it was for or against government-sponsored health care, the so-called public option. The strategists say Mr. Obama needs to choose one plan and stick with it. Jeff?
Kimberly, any hints at this point on which plan he will choose to go with?
Well, if you speak to the White House strategists, they say they are sticking with the public option. But behind the scenes, Congress right now, during the recess, is debating the merits of that option back and forth and trying to come up with a compromise. What the White House is hoping is they'll come up with that compromise before they come back in session, and then the president doesn't have to break the tie.
All right, Kimberly Dozier from the White House this evening. Kimberly, thank you. Overseas tonight, dozens of wildfires are raging in Greece, in villages and olive groves north of Athens. Soldiers and firefighters are trying to protect homes as people flee from those flames. 2 children's hospitals were evacuated. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, a history-making haven not far from the presidential retreat. But up next, a new wave of foreclosures. The cause, blame rising unemployment. On the economic front, the good news seems to keep coming. A surprisingly upbeat housing report showed sales of previously owned homes were up 7.2% in July. But there is at least one issue still causing concern, the still rising unemployment rate, which, as Priya David tells us, is leading to even more housing foreclosures.
After Eric Williams was laid off from his job as a copy machine repairman earlier this year, he fell behind on his home mortgage.
I'm trying to keep it together. You know, it's hard.
Williams is at high risk of losing his New Jersey home, now 120 days delinquent on his current payment of $2,700 a month.
It's an American dream to own a house and, you know, live happily and earn a good wage.
But that good wage is increasingly out of reach as unemployment rose in 26 states last month, with 6 people unemployed for every 1 new job.
Eric Williams is facing what economists say is the next wave of foreclosures. Prime, fixed-rate borrowers who can no longer afford to pay their mortgages because of unemployment.
Already, these once stable borrowers make up 1/3 of homeowners starting the foreclosure process. 9% of prime loans are actually in foreclosure. That's up from 5% 1 year ago.
House prices, my bet is, are going to fall another 10 to 15%. So we're going to see more and more people in this situation where they have negative equity. They owe more than the value of their house. So if they get hit with a spell of unemployment, they have nothing to fall back on.
At Neighborhood America, a nonprofit that helps homeowners in financial distress, Marietta Rodriguez sees a trend.
50% of the borrowers in distress that are reaching out to housing counselors right now indicate job loss, reduction in income as a major reason for delinquency that is leaving them vulnerable to foreclosure.
Williams hopes to stave off foreclosure by modifying his mortgage through a new lender.
And if the loan modification goes through, then how much would you pay?
It could go down to $1,000 with the escrow built in.
A savings that's music to his ears. Priya David, CBS News, Plainfield, New Jersey.
Up next on tonight's CBS Evening News, a young Guantanamo detainee could be leaving for home after a military prosecutor chose to help the defense. One of the youngest detainees at the Guantanamo Bay prison could be returning this weekend to Afghanistan, where he was arrested 7 years ago for allegedly throwing a grenade at American soldiers. Mohammed Jawad's big break came when a U.S. military lawyer made a highly unusual choice. Our chief foreign affairs correspondent Lara Logan has more.
Information about al-Qaeda. He was captured and he was executed.
Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Daryl Vanderveld could not keep silent.
Silence in the face of evil is collaboration with evil.
He was a military prosecutor in Guantanamo until he decided to speak out against the corruption of justice he found there.
Our fighting men and women who are putting themselves in harm's way, they're not fighting for rigged kangaroo trials.
That's exactly the kind of trial Colonel Vanderveld says they were getting at Guantanamo. And he should know. He was the lead prosecutor in 7 cases. When Daryl arrived there in May 2007, he was fresh from the battlefield in Iraq.
I wanted to punish them I wanted vengeance.
I would characterize him as a true believer.
Major David Fracht was the defense attorney in the case that would ultimately compel Darrell to risk everything. Mohammed Jawad was accused of throwing a hand grenade at 2 U.S. Special Forces soldiers in 2002, injuring them severely. At the time, this Afghan boy was 16 or 17 years old. His case was prosecuted aggressively by Vanderveld.
So it was clear to you that he was guilty?
I had no doubt in my mind, based on what I had received, that he would be convicted.
But a chance discovery would reveal that important evidence in the case had been withheld.
I saw something that floored me.
In the evidence file of an unrelated trial, Vanderveld discovered Jawad had made a statement to military investigators, a statement that was backed up by the U.S. Guard Force at his prison.
He had been hooded and slapped, that he had been shackled, hooded, and thrown downstairs.
And you knew nothing about this as the prosecutor in his case?
I knew nothing about the existence of the statement.
How's that possible?
The evidence was in a state of chaos.
By law, Vanderveld had to share his discovery with the defense. He now believed Jawad was tortured, even though he had no intelligence to offer. And he did not believe Jawad could be convicted.
I think that he was just as appalled by what he found in those records as I was.
Fracht says that discovery changed Darrell Vanderveld forever. He couldn't ignore the violations of law he discovered, critical evidence that was missing, lost, or withheld.
The rules are applicable to everyone. There is no exception. There are no different forms of justice.
That led Vanderveld to make the most agonizing decision of his life. In September 2008, he resigned from the military commissions.
So your conscience is clear?
My conscience is not clear. I prosecuted Mohammed Jawad for too long. I participated in the commissions for too long.
The Pentagon, in a statement to CBS News, said Vanderveld's statements are proven to be unsubstantiated. He received a poor evaluation report, which effectively ends his military career.
You do the right thing, you will forever be grateful that you did it, no matter what happens to you.
Lara Logan reporting. Also tonight, updating a story we reported earlier this year. An Egyptian man was released from a federal detention center in Miami yesterday after an immigration judge refused to order him deported. Immigration agents arrested 23-year-old former college student Youssef Megahead in April, shortly after he was acquitted of terrorism-related charges. We'll be right back. It is a community of professors and politicians, businessmen and artists. Nothing unusual on the exclusive summer retreat of Martha's Vineyard, but Randall Pinkston explains what does make Oak Bluffs special.
When the first family arrives on Martha's Vineyard, they will be returning to a familiar place. As a U.S. Senator, Barack Obama and his family often vacationed here, spending time in Oak Bluffs, a historic haven for African Americans vacationing on the vineyard. This visit, of course, is different. The first family is renting a private home far from Oak Bluffs, but the president will be seeking the same experience as generations of successful Black Americans.
Well, this area is all about tradition, it's all about family, it's going to give him a chance to relax.
These days, Martha's Vineyard may be one of the most racially diverse vacation spots in the nation, representative perhaps of the very spirit that helped put President Obama in the White House. But the island still retains a distinct and long-standing African-American tradition.
We go back to slavery days.
Historian Robert Hayton, a longtime Oak Bluffs resident, says Martha's Vineyard was one of the first places in the nation to embrace a Black leisure class.
We're involved here in civic activities, business activities, religious activities. We've built some institution on this island over years.
The documentary, A Place of Our Own, chronicles African Americans who opened businesses and built summer homes. They even had their own beach, nicknamed the Inkwell.
It's been a place where, at least for the summer, the world did not look at us and define us solely by race.
It was one of the reasons Lynn Gordon's family came here more than 60 years ago, to escape Boston and its racial divides.
I couldn't fish in Boston. I couldn't ride my bicycle at will wherever.
Gordon found freedom here then and now, and thinks the new first family will too.
Everybody's here to relax, vacation, and not really be bothered. So I'm happy to see him come.
A special place for all who come here. Randall Pinkston, CBS News, Martha's Vineyard.
That is the CBS Evening News tonight. Russ Mitchell will be here tomorrow night. I'm Jeff Glor, CBS News in New York. Good night.